My name is Thalen Mercer, and 3 months ago, I did something most people would call life-changing. I paid off $450,000 of debt money I didn't owe for a home I didn't live in for a parent who never asked me to, but always expected I'd handle it. I didn't make a big deal about it. There were no announcements, no thank you speeches, not even a balloon. Just a quiet transaction, a wire transfer from my account to the mortgage company that had been threatening to take my mother's house. And that was it. Gone. Debt-free. Just like that. What people saw was the surface that I had just bought myself a house. A gorgeous, light-filled lakeside property just outside Seattle, clean lines, wide windows, and stillness that soothed me after years of noise. What they didn't see was the sacrifice it took to get there. The long nights working double shifts at the research lab, the 10 years of living in a 500-square-foot apartment with a leaky bathroom and a view of the alley, the startup I helped build and sold early, not for profit, but for freedom. They didn't see the years I skipped vacations the way I declined invitations, the silent calculation of every expense. They didn't see that I'd given up more than money. I'd given up time, so much time. But that's the thing about sacrifice. When you do it quietly, people assume it was easy. I never imagined I'd be the kind of person who'd describe paying off someone else's $450,000 mortgage as a form of closure, but that's exactly what it felt like. It was the end of a long chapter 1 where I had silently played the role of fixer-provider, the one who didn't need help because I had it all together. In truth, I didn't have much at all. No husband, no kids. Just a cat named Silas, a drawer full of expired plane tickets I never used, and a mother who loved me in theory but rarely in action. Still, I didn't do it for her. I did it because that house, the house she lived in, was our childhood home. The last place that held a version of my sister and me before everything shifted, before favoritism had names, before I learned that love in some families comes with strings and sometimes price tags. So when I signed the final payment, I didn't expect celebration. But part of me hoped maybe just once someone would say, "You didn't have to, but thank you." They didn't. Instead, 2 weeks later, my mother asked if we could have a dinner, a small family gathering she called it. Just to mark this turning point, she said, "We've all come so far." I thought she meant the debt was a weight lifted. I didn't realize she meant something else entirely. I agreed, of course. I always do. I even offered to host it at my new house. It had been freshly furnished, minimalist, intentional, the opposite of cluttered chaos I'd grown up in. My co-workers had called it spa-like. For me, it was the first thing in my adult life that felt purely mine. A space untouched by obligation. A space I could breathe in. I spent the week before the dinner carefully arranging every detail not for show, but because I liked things calm. Flowers in the foyer, soft lighting in the dining room, a playlist that drifted like water in the background. I cooked 2 braised short ribs herbed potatoes, the kind of things I never had time for when I lived on takeout and deadlines. I told myself this was a gift, a moment of peace, a celebration of what I could finally call balance, and maybe, just maybe, a small offering to my family, one that said, "I've done my part. We're okay now. Let's start fresh." It's funny how people can mistake your silence for consent, your kindness for compliance. The guest list was small. My mom, my sister Brielle, her 4 kids, and an uncle from Tacoma who always brought wine even though no one ever drank it. Brielle hadn't said much when I told her I bought a house. Just a quick, "That's nice. You finally got your perfect little hideaway." No congratulations, no questions. Just that odd tone, half smile, half something I couldn't name. But then again, that was our dynamic. Brielle was the loud one, the charming one, the one who had made motherhood her identity after 2 failed marriages and a long string of career breaks. I was the responsible one, the workhorse, the one who sent money without being asked, the one who got Christmas cards with her name printed after the kids. To Brielle, the kids, and Thalen, I didn't mind. Or at least I told myself I didn't. But that night, standing in my kitchen with wine glasses lined up, the smell of rosemary in the air, and a playlist humming behind me, I let myself believe just for a moment that something had shifted. That we'd sit down, eat, laugh. that maybe they'd see me not as the backup plan, but as a person. I didn't know that by the end of the evening, I'd be staring at my sister across the table as she smiled and said in front of everyone, "The kids and I are so excited to move in next week." And I definitely didn't know my mother would smile beside her, lift her glass, and say, "We just knew you'd be okay with it." Brielle was always the one with a story. And somehow, no matter how chaotic or avoidable that story was, people treated her like a hero for surviving it. She was 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she walked into every room like a sitcom star, entering stage left hair slightly tousled, excuses, half-formed eyes wide with performative exhaustion. "You wouldn't believe the morning I've had," she'd say, dropping bags, car keys, and at least one child's sock at the door. And people would believe her. They always did, because Brielle was tired. Brielle had 4 kids. Brielle was doing her best. I never once heard someone ask if I was tired, maybe because they assumed people with no kids and a good paycheck didn't get tired. Or maybe because I didn't look it. Brielle had Lily when she was 23. By 30, she had 4 daughters and a husband who had just walked out. I remember getting that call like it was yesterday. "Tom left," she said. "He said he wasn't cut out for this." I was in the middle of reviewing clinical trial data, my desk covered in Post-it notes and empty coffee cups. "I don't know how I'm going to do this," she whispered. And because I didn't know what else to say, I offered to send money. That became a pattern. School supplies, I covered them. Rent short, I wired it. Medical bills, groceries, emergency plumber, done. Not once did she offer to pay me back. And not once did I ask. Because in our family, Brielle was the one who struggled and I was the one who was doing fine. And if you were doing fine, you were supposed to help. That expectation wasn't spoken, but it didn't need to be. It showed up in the way our mother's voice would soften whenever Brielle's name came up, in the way she said things like, "She's doing the best she can, and it's hard being a single mom. And you wouldn't understand, Thalen, you've never had to put someone else first." I had, of course, but not in ways that earned sympathy, only in ways that made me seem cold, practical, detached. "She's got so much potential," Mom would say, as if potential paid bills. If life had been just a little kinder to her, then she'd trail off with a sigh. Usually while I was writing another check. Brielle had a way of turning small things into grand gestures. If she made boxed mac and cheese for her kids, she posted it with the caption, "Single mom win homemade dinner in between 2 jobs. Still standing, still loving, still fighting." It would get 200 likes. People would comment, "You're amazing. Your kids are lucky to have you. You're what strength looks like." I'd scroll past those posts during my 14-hour lab days eating oatmeal for dinner and wonder what that kind of validation felt like, what it was like to have people cheer for you just for trying. She talked often about her big plans, a parenting blog, an Etsy store, a handmade candle business, a YouTube channel where she'd talk about resilience and faith and healing. Once she mentioned she might go back to school for psychology. Another time, interior design. Her dreams shifted like weather, each one briefly lighting up the sky before disappearing behind clouds of exhaustion and excuses. "Once the girls are older," she'd say. "Once things calm down. Once I get back on my feet." And somehow everyone believed that once was right around the corner. Last Thanksgiving, she brought a printed vision board to dinner. It was laminated. On it were pictures of modern farmhouse kitchens, open concept living rooms, Disneyland, and a white SUV circled 3 times in purple marker. "Manifesting my future," she told the table with a wink. Mom was impressed. "She's got such drive," she said. "You can just feel it." I said nothing. I didn't ask how she planned to afford Disneyland when her last 3 rent checks had bounced. I didn't ask who paid for the color printer or the lamination. I didn't say that drive without direction is just spinning wheels, because it wouldn't have mattered. I'd sound like the bitter sister, the one who doesn't get it. And maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't understand what it felt like to have 4 kids clinging to you while the world demanded rent groceries and patience you didn't have. But what I did understand was that no matter how many times she got rescued, she always found a way to look like the underdog, and I always looked like the villain if I said no. So when Mom called Brielle inspiring, I smiled. When Brielle posted another fundraiser for school uniforms, I donated. When the dishwasher broke again, I ordered the replacement. Because I was the reliable one. The grounded one. The one who had the spreadsheet and the savings account and the voice that didn't waver. But inside, the scales kept tipping. Every dollar I sent her, every hour I lost at work to handle something urgent, every time I swallowed frustration and offered understanding, it all added weight. And I didn't know it then, but something was starting to shift. Not all at once, not with fury, just the slow, quiet kind of shift that happens when you realize a pattern's been playing out your whole life and you're finally tired enough to stop dancing to it. My house wasn't huge. Not by the standards of gated suburbs or Pinterest fantasy boards, but it was perfect to me. It sat quietly near the edge of a wooded lake outside Seattle, tucked between evergreens and maples that turned fire red in autumn. Clean white siding, wide front porch, no picket fence, no show-off landscaping, just quiet. Inside, it was simple hardwood floors, warm tones, soft light from long horizontal windows. Every piece of furniture had been chosen deliberately. Every wall color was something I'd tested under different daylight angles. There were no toys in corners, no backpacks hung on doorknobs, no cereal bowls left behind on counters. For the first time in my adult life, I could walk into a room and find it exactly how I left it, and I loved that. There were 5 rooms, total 2 downstairs, 3 up. I used the smallest bedroom as my office, with a desk facing the window and a soft green chair in the corner where I sometimes read case reports or watched the rain. Another room stayed empty for now, maybe a guest room someday, or maybe nothing. I liked not having to decide right away. The master bedroom faced the lake, and sometimes at night I left the curtains open and let the moon pour in like a blessing. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. That Saturday, the day of the dinner, I had the house just the way I wanted. Music, low flowers, trimmed wine breathing. I wore a soft blouse and linen pants and felt something I didn't recognize at first: pride. I had built this, quietly, on my own terms. So when the knock came an hour early, I felt my chest tighten. It was my mother, of course. "I thought I'd come early just in case you needed help," she said, brushing past me into the kitchen, holding a tray of deviled eggs and that usual air of preemptive critique. She looked around with narrowed eyes. "It's spacious," she said, which from her was dangerously close to a compliment. "I've got everything set," I said gently, taking the tray. "The roast is finishing, salads chilling, drinks are ready." She drifted into the living room, trailing her fingers across the back of the couch. "You really do like things bare." "It's minimalist," I said, adjusting a cushion. "Intentional." She hummed, not quite agreeing. Then she looked up the stairs. 3 bedrooms up there, 2 and an office, I corrected. She stepped toward the staircase. "What are you going to do with all that space?" There it was. I smiled politely. Nothing yet. Maybe a reading room, or a guest room. She turned back toward me with a tone that tried to sound casual but didn't quite hide the edge. "Brielle could really use a place like this. All those girls in that 2-bedroom apartment, they're practically stacked like bunk beds." I bit down a response and turned to check the oven instead. "She's been through a lot," Mom continued, as if reading off a script she'd practiced. "And still, she shows up smiling. I don't know how she does it." "She's resilient," I said flatly. The doorbell rang. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was Brielle with Lily, Emma, Sophie, and Ava tumbling in behind her like a small stampede. "Whoa," Aunt Thay Lily said, spinning in the foyer. "Your house is like clean." "It's like a museum," Sophie added, dropping her backpack right in the middle of the rug. "Please don't touch the glass," I said gently as Emma leaned on the dining room sideboard. Brielle followed behind, sunglasses on her headphone in hand. "Wow," she said, doing a slow spin. "This place is a whole vibe." "Glad you like it," I said. She walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge uninvited, then grabbed a sparkling water. "Do you even cook in here? It's spotless." "Just did," I said, checking the roast again. "You don't even have kids and you've got all this space." She popped the can. "I swear you could fit 2 of my apartments inside this place." Mom appeared beside her like an echo. "Well, Thalen's always been practical with her money. She doesn't waste time on luxuries." I nearly laughed, as if nothing in this house was a luxury. Ava, the youngest, peeked up the stairs. "Can we go look at the rooms?" Before I could answer, Brielle waved her off. "Go ahead, sweetie." But no jumping on the beds. I should have said something. But it was already happening, just like it always did. My space becoming theirs. My silence mistaken for welcome. The kids ran upstairs, their footsteps thudding on hardwood like a marching band. "Girls," I called gently, "please don't go through closed doors." "They're just excited," Brielle said, sipping her drink. "This place must feel like a castle to them." I looked around at the smooth walls, the carefully arranged shelves, the quiet I had worked so hard to build. It didn't feel like a castle. It felt like a person, me, finally taking up space. But to them, it was extra, optional, up for redistribution. They deserve something better than what I've been able to give them. Brielle added, voice lowering into her best weary mother tone. "But you know how it is. Do I wanted to ask, do you—" Instead, I nodded, pretending not to notice that she had just started filming a video on her phone. "Aunt Thay's house reveal," she whispered to the camera. "Wait till you see the upstairs total dream." By 6:30, the house had settled into a warm, easy hum. The table was set, the roast-carved wine glasses catching amber light from the pendant chandelier overhead. Conversation flowed around the room like background music, soft, scattered, familiar. The girls were surprisingly well-behaved, clustered around the smaller dining nook with plates of chicken and mashed potatoes. My mother had taken charge of serving as she always did, quietly adjusting silverware placements with passive-aggressive precision. Brielle's laugh cut through the noise every few minutes, always a bit too loud, but somehow charming enough that no one minded. I stood for a moment in the archway between the kitchen and the dining room, watching it all. The food, the people, the flicker of candlelight across glass. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't conflict. For once, I thought maybe we were okay. Maybe it wouldn't go sideways this time. I poured the last glass of Pinot Noir and took my seat at the head of the long oak table. My seat, my table, my house. I tapped my spoon lightly against the glass. Before we dig into dessert, I began, voice steady but warm. "I just want to say thank you for coming tonight. It means more than I can say to have everyone here safe-fed and full of wine." A few chuckles. My uncle raised his glass in mock salute. I continued. "This year's been a lot. But this house, this space, it's something I worked hard for. Not just with money, but with time, with energy I didn't always have, with sacrifice. It's more than walls and windows. It's peace. And I'm happy to finally share that peace with the people I love." Glasses clinked. Someone murmured, "Hear, hear." A small wave of applause. I smiled, settling back into my chair. The roast had been a hit. The lighting was flattering. Even Mom hadn't criticized the seasoning. For one suspended moment, I felt it balance. Then my mother stood. She didn't ask for attention, didn't clear her throat or tap her glass. She just rose slowly, holding her wine, and smiled the way someone does before announcing something they know will change the room. "I think it's time we shared our little update too," she said, casting a glance toward Brielle. My stomach tightened. "Now I know Thalen wouldn't want us to make a big fuss," Mom continued. "But we're all family here, and I think it's important we support each other in new beginnings." Brielle shifted in her chair, smiling coyly. Her youngest Ava was already looking up at her with wide, excited eyes. My voice caught in my throat. "Mom, what?" She raised a hand gently. "Let me finish." Then she turned toward the room. "I gave Brielle your house keys," she said. "She and the kids will be moving in next week." Silence. And then, not from me, but from the table, came the sound of clapping. Actual clapping. My uncle started it. Brielle beamed. The girls squealed. "Wait," I said. Lily stood and clapped along. "We're moving into Aunt Thay's house," Emma chimed in. "I get the room with the round window." I stood slowly. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Mom turned to me, still smiling. "They need the space, sweetheart. And you've got so much of it. It just makes sense." Brielle stood too, nodding like we'd rehearsed it. "We're so grateful, Thalen. Honestly, This house is a dream, and the girls, well, they're over the moon. You didn't ask me, I said quietly. The words felt strange in my mouth, fragile but heavy. Brielle's voice was soft but rehearsed. We didn't want to put pressure on you. But Mom said, well, you'd probably say yes. My mother placed a hand on Brielle's shoulder like a priest blessing a bride. I knew, she said, because you always show up for family. I looked around the table. Eyes darted toward me, then back to their wine. No one quite knew where to land. But the mood had shifted from celebration to tension, and I was suddenly the villain in my own living room. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't flip the table or hurl accusations. I just stood there with the stem of my wine glass still between my fingers and felt the air around me change. My pulse was slow, strangely steady, like my body had moved into survival mode without asking permission. You told them they were moving in, I said finally, before asking me. We knew you'd be reasonable, Mom said gently. We've already started packing, Brielle added almost proudly. There it was, the quiet premeditation beneath the casual betrayal. This wasn't impulsive. This was a plan. I'm sorry I said, though, I didn't mean it. But I never agreed to this. Brielle's smile faltered. But the girls are so excited, she said, voice pitching upward. They've already picked their rooms. I even made a Pinterest board for the bunk beds. You made what I asked. A design board, she said, blinking like it was obvious. We were thinking of soft neutrals with like mustard yellow accents. You don't have to worry. I'll handle the decor. I felt dizzy. My house, my home, being redecorated in conversation like it was a community rec center. I need a minute, I said. You're not happy, Mom said as if it were a surprise. After everything Brielle's been through, you still can't be generous. You mean after everything I've done, I said. After the mortgage, the school fees, the endless Venmo transfers. What exactly am I being stingy with now? Oxygen. The words slipped out harder than I'd intended, but the damage was already done. My mother's expression hardened. I didn't raise you to be selfish. No, I said, staring at her. You raised me to be silent. And with that, I set my wine glass down on the table carefully, precisely, and walked out of the room. I went upstairs not because I needed space, but because I needed walls, real solid ones. Something to hold me up while the rest of me wanted to collapse. From the landing, I could still hear the buzz of voices downstairs, the clink of silverware, the laugh-track politeness that families default to when they don't want to acknowledge tension. I closed the door to my office not all the way, just enough to mute them, and leaned against the frame, breathing deep. 30 seconds later, the door creaked open again. Brielle stepped in without knocking. Of course. She looked surprised, like I had somehow ruined the mood by walking out on my own ambush. She said, brushing her hair behind one ear. You could have just talked to us instead of making a scene. I laughed, short, cold. You mean like the scene where my house was offered up like a raffle prize? She crossed her arms. You live alone, Thalen. This place is massive. You don't even use half the rooms. I gestured around me. And that means I forfeited ownership because I didn't fill every corner with noise and toys. We're family, she said. We deserve help. There it was. Not a request, a declaration. I pushed off the doorframe and stood straighter. Needing help is one thing. Declaring eminent domain over my house is another. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. No, Brielle. You know what's dramatic, walking into someone's home, filming their space, letting your kids run wild, and announcing a move that was never discussed. Her expression shifted guilt maybe, but buried beneath a familiar shield of offense. We didn't want to put pressure on you. Mom said if we waited, you'd say no. You didn't wait, I said, voice lower now. You planned. You packed. You promised your kids bedrooms in a house that isn't yours. A beat of silence passed between us. Then she said, quieter but sharper. You owe me, Thalen. You think you're the only one who worked hard? I gave up everything for my girls. I gave up my 20s, my degree, my sanity some days. You got to chase a dream while I stayed home changing diapers. I felt the words like splinters, old and familiar. This argument wasn't new, just recycled. And I asked. I gave up holidays dating health. I paid your bills. I paid mom's mortgage. I gave up a chunk of my savings for you and still got labeled as the selfish one because I didn't smile while doing it. Brielle didn't answer. Instead, her gaze flicked to the door as little footsteps pounded up the stairs. Aunt Thay Sophie yelled, barging in with a piece of masking tape. "Can we write our names on the doors so we don't forget which one's ours?" Behind her, Lily held up her phone. "We already made the video." "Wanna see?" I blinked. "What video?" Lily spun the screen toward me. It was a TikTok barely 30 seconds long, but already slickly edited with music sparkles and the words, "Moving into Auntie Thay's dream house." I watched in stunned silence as the video cut from a zoomed-in shot of the entryway chandelier to Brielle, winking at the camera beside my stove, then Sophie doing a cartwheel in the upstairs hallway. "Please tell me this wasn't posted," I said. "It's viral." Lily grinned. 300,000 views already. Someone called it a fairy tale move-in. We might get a brand collab. My mouth was dry. "Get out," I said softly. "All of you, but we," Sophie started. "Out," I said louder now. Brielle stepped forward. "Okay, calm down. They're just excited." I rounded on her. "You let them film a house tour of a home they don't live in, and you posted it, without asking me." Her chin lifted. "They're children, Fallon. They didn't mean any harm. They didn't know better." "You did." The door behind us creaked again, and in walked our mother holding a half-folded blanket and a mug, like this was just another quiet night at home. "What's going on?" she asked. "Everything all right up here?" "No," I said. "Everything is not all right." Mom looked between us, brow furrowing. "Why are you so upset?" I took a breath. "Because you made decisions about my life, my home, my space, without me." She didn't blink. "When I was your age," she said, "I took in my sister's boys after her divorce. 4 of them. I didn't think twice." I closed my eyes. "That was your choice." "That was family," she corrected. "This is manipulation," I said. She moved closer, her tone softening like it always did before a guilt trip. "You've been blessed, sweetheart, more than most. A beautiful home, a good job. You've never had to struggle the way we have." "I've struggled," I said. "You just never saw it, or didn't want to." Mom shook her head. "This isn't about you. It's about doing what's right." Funny I said how what's right always seems to cost me everything. Her eyes narrowed then. "I didn't raise you to be so selfish." I laughed. "No, you raised me to be convenient." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, heavy, the kind that changes the air in a room. Downstairs, I could still hear voices, my uncle's deep baritone clinking glasses, the soft hum of my carefully curated playlist continuing like nothing had happened. Like a dream I hadn't realized I'd woken up from. I turned to Brielle one last time. "This isn't happening. I don't care what was promised or filmed or posted. You are not moving in here." She stared at me, blinking, then said very quietly, "You're going to look real heartless when people find out." I met her eyes. "I'm fine with that." The next morning, I woke before the sun, heart pounding like I'd run a mile in my sleep. My kitchen still smelled faintly of garlic and rosemary, but the warmth from the night before had long since curdled into something sour. The wine glasses sat half empty on the table plates, crusted with food nobody bothered to rinse. I hadn't slept. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's calm smile as she handed over my house keys like a party favor. By 7:30, I was sitting at my kitchen island with a legal pad, a cup of coffee, and the sinking feeling that this wasn't over. I wasn't just upset. I was uneasy. Something didn't add up. I started with Brielle's TikTok. I hadn't looked at it since the night before, but now I needed to know what the world had seen. I opened the app and searched her username, rmomof4magic. It popped right up, verified. 128,000 followers. And there it was. The video, moving into my sister's dream home. Chuck New Beginnings Kreider Family First are Miracle Shappen. The clip had been watched 340,000 times, thousands of comments mostly cheering her on. You deserve this, mama sisters who support each other, so everything. Manifestation works. There was no mention of me, no credit, just a vague, glowing story of doors opening. I kept scrolling. Another video, her daughter's packing boxes at their apartment dancing in the middle of clutter, getting ready for our big move. Thank you, God, it was dated 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks, long before the dinner, long before the conversation I thought we hadn't had. This wasn't spontaneous, this was staged. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Hi, Fallon, this is Jay from Blue Pacific Realty. Just confirming we're still on for Wednesday's call. Happy to move forward once inspection docs are in. Jay, I stared at the screen. Blue Pacific Realty. I had never contacted them. I called back. Blue Pacific, this is Jay. Hi, this is Fallon Mercer. You texted me this morning. A pause. Oh, yes. So glad to hear from you. Brielle said you'd be the primary contact going forward. My heart dropped. She said that you were coordinating the next steps for listing the property. It's a prime neighborhood. Your Lakeview alone could add 6 figures. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm sorry. This property isn't for sale, and I never authorized any listing. Another pause, longer this time. I see? Well, we haven't filed paperwork yet, just early estimates. Brielle mentioned your mother had signed a temporary authorization form. I need a copy, I said. He hesitated. It's not a contract, just a statement of intent to prepare listing materials. I repeated myself. Send me a copy. It arrived 10 minutes later, a PDF with a Blue Pacific header signed by my mother. The form wasn't binding, but it was close enough. It gave the brokerage temporary visual access for staging and pre-listing walkthroughs under the claim that Brielle was currently residing or preparing to reside at the property. Preparing to reside. My hands shook as I scrolled to the signature line. My mother's name scrawled in that confident loopy cursive she always used for birthday cards and bank checks. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about the kids needing space. This was a setup. I called my mother. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I texted, did you sign a document giving Brielle access to my house? No reply. I got in my car. Her apartment was across town in the same building Brielle had been living in since her last lease fell through. I'd co-signed for it 6 months ago. A temporary favor. One of many. The lobby door was unlocked, so I let myself in and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. I didn't knock gently. Brielle answered in leggings and a sweatshirt hair and a messy bun phone still in her hand. She blinked. Oh. Hey. I held up my phone. What is this? She barely glanced. We're just getting things in order, no big deal. Mom said you and Mom are planning to list my house. Her mouth opened, closed. No one's listing anything, she said finally. It's just talk. Ideas. I stepped into the apartment. It was half-packed. Boxes labeled girls' clothes and toys lined the walls, taped up kitchenware, an empty bookshelf. She hadn't just started. You told your kids they were moving in before you ever asked me? I said. You filmed it. You posted it. And now you're planning to sell the house. It's not what you think, she said. Then what is it? She looked tired suddenly. We can't afford this place anymore. The rent went up again. The car needs repairs. I maxed out the credit card just to keep groceries on the table last month. Then ask for help, I said. Don't steal it. That hit. Her face changed. I didn't steal anything. You forged access to a home that's not yours, used Mom's signature, and contacted a real estate agent. I didn't forge anything. Mom signed it. I stared at her. Then she's in on it. She didn't deny it. I sat down on the armrest of the nearest couch. My pulse had settled into a low, sick throb. Are you trying to sell my house and move to Texas? Brielle looked down. We thought we could start over, she said. Houses are cheaper there. And if we sold yours, split the proceeds. It's not your house. You don't even need all that space, she said, snapping again. You could get something smaller, closer to the lab, more practical. You mean something less mine? She didn't answer. I stood suddenly too tired to yell. This isn't just entitlement anymore. This is betrayal. I just wanted a fresh start, she whispered. Somewhere the girls wouldn't feel like charity cases. You could have had help, I said. Instead, you planned a heist. She looked away. I left. And as I walked down the hallway of that apartment building I'd helped her move into, past the boxes I'd once carried upstairs, I realized something ugly and final. This wasn't about what I had. It was about what they believed I owed. It took less than 12 hours after the real estate call for me to sit across from a lawyer. Her name was Aileen Connors, mid-40s, sharp eyes, navy suit. The kind of woman who didn't waste time smiling unless it served a purpose. I liked her immediately. She reminded me of me, efficient, focused, allergic to nonsense. Her office was in a glass tower downtown, tucked between a dentist's office and a venture capital firm. The waiting room smelled like cedar and copier toner. I didn't bother with small talk. I handed her the paperwork from Blue Pacific and said simply, I need to know what rights I have, and how fast I can shut this down. Aileen scanned the documents quickly, flipping pages with practiced precision. She paused at the signature line. So your mother signed this access form? I nodded. Without telling me, Brielle's using it to try and stage a sale. Aileen arched an eyebrow. Your name is the only one on the deed. Yes, bought it outright. No liens, no co-signers. Then you're still the sole legal owner. No one can sell, lease, or reassign access without your consent. But she said, tapping the document, you'll want to file a formal revocation of this access authorization immediately. It's not binding for sale, but it can cause confusion, especially if the realtor's already involved. So this can't go further, not legally. But if you don't take action, they'll keep pushing the narrative that you're fine with it. And unfortunately, public perception can get messy. I felt the words settle like a stone in my chest. They're already moving. She filmed a TikTok claiming she's moving in. It's gone viral. Aileen didn't flinch. Then, they're betting you won't fight back. I exhaled slow. My mother says she just wanted Brielle to feel safe. She gave away your house keys and signed a proxy form. That's not safe. That's reckless. Aileen folded her hands. Do you want to pursue criminal action? I looked down. I couldn't imagine pressing charges against my own family. Not yet. No, I said. I just want them out. Off the listing. Off the internet. Out of my life. Then revoke the authorization document, all correspondence, and be ready to send a cease and desist if they post again. That should have felt like control. Instead, it felt like standing on a dock watching my home drift out to sea and knowing I'd have to swim to get it back. By the time I got home, the first email from Brielle's lawyer was waiting in my inbox. Subject, R.E. Recent Property Dispute. Urgent, from Hannah Reyes Family and Equity Law. It started cordial enough. We represent Ms. Brielle Jensen in an evolving family housing situation. But halfway down, the tone shifted. They'd been made aware that I was seeking legal assistance to block Brielle from accessing the home she'd been promised by family agreement. No written proof, of course, but enough soft language to hint at a shared understanding. Then came the threat. Should this matter escalate into a legal contest, we are prepared to defend Ms. Jensen vigorously. Public interest tends to favor struggling single mothers over affluent siblings. A media narrative that frames this as an act of cold displacement could be damaging to your professional and personal reputation, especially given your visibility in the research community. I read it twice. There it was, the quiet blackmail of public opinion. The trap I knew too well: say nothing and be erased. Speak up and become the villain. I forwarded the email to Aileen. She replied 10 minutes later. Empty leverage. But they're smart. They know your type. You're quiet, responsible, respected. The kind who avoids drama. That's exactly why they think this'll work. I stared at her message for a long time. She was right. That night, I sat on the porch watching the lake go still as the last light faded. I hadn't told anyone at work. Not yet. I didn't want to see the looks of pity. Or worse, the subtle judgment. Why don't you just let your sister stay? You have so much. But it wasn't about the house anymore. Not really. It was about being told I didn't deserve the thing I had built, that my ownership was conditional, my peace negotiable. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom this time. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted Brielle to feel safe. She's been through so much. I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself to. What I wanted to text was, "So have I. You just never saw it." Instead, I opened a blank document and typed the first line of the revocation letter. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even angry. It was just overdue. I didn't sleep the night I filed the revocation notice. Instead, I stayed up at the kitchen island, same one that had once held the cheese boards and candlelight to build a legal binder and a plan for war. It was quiet work, the kind that didn't feel dramatic in the moment. No loud confrontations, no slammed doors. Just the soft tap of keys, the shuffle of paper, the quiet assembling of truth. I started with the TikToks. Not just the viral one, but all of them. I scrolled back weeks, maybe months. Screenshotted every post where Brielle hinted at divine intervention doors opening our dream house. I noted timestamps, downloaded videos, labeled folders by date. In one clip, she stood in my kitchen holding a mug I'd bought in Iceland, saying, "Some dreams just land in your lap when the timing's right." The caption read, "Basha blessed." She never said my name. That was her trick. She let people assume. Next came the messages. Texts from our mother, some warm others calculated. One from a week before the dinner, the girls are already planning their new room setups. "Don't stress, this is a good thing." I hadn't responded. I hadn't realized I needed to. Then I opened my voicemail. There were 5 I hadn't checked. One from my dentist. 2 spam. One from a friend I hadn't seen in months. And then there it was. A voicemail from Jay the realtor. "Hey Thalen, just circling back to confirm Wednesday for photos and staging prep. Brielle mentioned you might not be available, but she said we could coordinate through her if needed. Congrats again, beautiful property." My jaw tightened. I forwarded the file to my attorney, labeled it "Unauthorized Sale Attempt," then added it to the binder I was building. Dividers, sleeves, hard copies of emails. Digital wasn't enough anymore. I needed weight. Finally, I clicked on the voice memo app and replayed a recording I'd taken during a call with Mom the day before. I had needed clarity. Proof. She'd answered on the second ring voice, cautious but not apologetic. "I just wanted Brielle to feel secure," she said when I asked about the document she signed. She needed something solid to hold on to. "So, you thought giving away my house behind my back was the solution?" "Don't be dramatic, Thalen. You weren't using all of it. It's just space. Space that could give 4 children some stability." "Space I worked for. And you should be proud. But pride doesn't keep people warm at night. Family does." I saved the recording, labeled it "Intent to Undermine Ownership." I wasn't being petty. I was being prepared. Somewhere around 2:15 a.m., I paused to stretch and felt an ache so deep it surprised me, not in my back or neck, but in my chest. Not grief, not anger. Recognition. Because this wasn't the first time I'd been erased, just the first time I'd fought it. I flashed back to sophomore year of high school. I'd built a science project from scratch, solar water purifier, 3-stage filter, all done in the garage with spare tubing and repurposed glass. Mom didn't come to the presentation. She was at one of Brielle's cheer competitions. But 2 days later, Brielle posted a photo of the purifier with the caption, "Proud of my sister's project. I helped her test it, LOL." She hadn't even asked about it. But everyone at school believed her. Everyone thought we were close, thought she was so supportive. And when I mentioned it to Mom, she'd just said, "Well, that's sweet of her, isn't it? Why are you so protective of everything?" Protective. That was the word they always used. Not focused. Not self-sufficient. Protective, like I was hoarding joy that should be shared. Every boundary I ever set was labeled cold. Every no was ingratitude. Every success was public until inconvenient. I remembered birthdays where Brielle blew out my candles. Times she borrowed my clothes without asking and posted them on Instagram like they were hers. I remembered how Mom would shrug when I brought it up. "You know she looks up to you." I remembered being told I was too particular about my time, too intense about school, too closed off emotionally. I remembered being called selfish the first time I didn't lend Brielle money. This wasn't new. It was just bigger. And for the first time, I was documenting it. By 3 a.m., the binder was full. I closed it and labeled the front Mercer property documentation of unauthorized access, misrepresentation, and intent to transfer without consent. Neat, plain, legally unassailable. Next came the media plan. I drafted a simple statement not to post, yet just to have. Just in case. It's been brought to my attention that false information is circulating regarding my home and family. I want to clarify I remain the sole legal owner of my home, and I did not authorize any move-in sale or public narrative otherwise. I support single mothers. I support family. But support should not come at the cost of personal violation or legal deceit. I saved it. Scheduled a draft post across platforms, just one sentence and a photo of my deed if things escalated. Aileen had warned me, if they weaponize sympathy, you need to be ready with facts. I was ready. By sunrise, I felt calmer. Not because the problem was solved, but because I was no longer reacting. I was reclaiming. That morning, as the lake brightened from gray to silver outside my window, I sat with a cup of tea and watched the binder sit neatly on the counter beside me. It looked small, unassuming, but I knew what it held. And this time, they wouldn't rewrite the story without me. The invitation came in the form of a text. No apologies, no explanation. Just dinner at 6, family only. Don't be late, Mom. I almost didn't go, but then I thought of the binder sitting on my dining table, color-coded and quietly damning, and I thought of Brielle's video still climbing in views and the emails from her lawyer threatening a PR spectacle I never asked for. So I went. My mother's house looked the same as always, rose bushes out front, ceramic frog by the porch, wind chimes clinking in the breeze. The air smelled like pot roast and powdered guilt. Inside, the whole family had gathered. Brielle, already seated kids clustered around her like a halo of innocence. My uncle summoned like some makeshift witness, my mother standing near the sink with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Glad you made it," she said, too warm. Too rehearsed. I stepped in and placed the legal binder on the dining table with a soft thud. "Let's get to it." Brielle blinked. Get to what I sat down across from her. Calm, steady. The part where we stop pretending this is a misunderstanding. My mother started to speak, but I raised a hand. No speeches tonight. You had yours at my house. This is mine. I pulled out a printed screenshot of the TikTok, the one with her kids jumping on my bed. The caption glowing, "Home Sweet Home." I slid it across the table. "You filmed your takeover?" I said, voice even. "I've been preparing mine." Brielle paled. I opened the binder slowly, deliberately, like a teacher laying out a final exam. "This is a revocation of all proxy access and temporary authority over my property, signed and notarized. Flip. This is a cease and desist letter issued through my attorney regarding all public content that implies residence or transfer of ownership. Flip. This," I said, holding up a printout, "is a screenshot of the realtor's confirmation that you and Mom were coordinating a potential listing without my knowledge or consent." I slid each document across the table like playing cards in a very quiet, very polite game of war. My mother's face tightened. "You didn't have to make it legal." "I didn't make it legal," I said. "You did. The moment you involved realtors and public declarations, you stepped out of family and into liability." Brielle folded her arms. "I didn't do anything illegal." "Not yet," I said. "But let me be clear, what you've done is unethical, manipulative, and if you keep pushing, provable. You filmed your children in a home they don't live in. You used my possessions as props in a narrative designed to attract views and pity. You approached a real estate agent about flipping my house, then tried to guilt me into silence when I pushed back." I pulled out one last document, a flash drive. "And just so we're clear, I've archived every TikTok, every caption, every comment, in case this ends up in court or the press. I won't be cast as the cold villain in a story you engineered for sympathy clicks." The room was silent. Then my mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. "I just wanted Brielle to feel secure. I looked at her. And what about me? Did you care whether I felt secure, whether I could trust my own family and my own home? She has children, Mom said quietly. You don't. There it was. The raw logic that had always driven her. Children meant leverage. Sacrifice meant sainthood. And I, quiet, single productive, was useful only when I gave without question. I walked to the sideboard and pressed play on the small Bluetooth speaker I'd brought with me. The tick-tock played music laughter little feet dancing down my hallway. Then Mom said, Auntie Thay said, yes, I get the round window room laughter. Applause. I paused it. This is not how family behaves, I said. Brielle looked like she wanted to cry. You don't understand what it's like raising 4 kids alone. I needed something solid. You needed a plan, I said. What you did was trespass and manipulate. You didn't ask, you assumed. You didn't hope, you plotted. And you dragged my name, my space, and my peace into it without once thinking about the cost to me. She looked at my mother. Are you going to say anything? My mother didn't meet her eyes. Her hands rested on the edge of the table knuckles white. I told you it would backfire, she whispered. Brielle's mouth opened. You said she'd cave. She didn't, Mom said. She never does. I gathered my papers, slowly tucking them back into the binder. This isn't revenge, I said. It's boundary, and it's final. I turned to my uncle. You're here as a witness. I expect this story to stay consistent because if I see one more video, one more lie, one more attempt to make me look cruel, this moves to court. He nodded, eyes wide. I headed toward the door. As I opened it, Brielle called out. What are we supposed to do now? I paused. Get real, I said. The internet might love your fairy tales, but reality's knocking. Then I stepped outside into the cooling dusk, the sound of wind chimes clinking behind me like an old warning bell I finally learned to hear. The call came less than 24 hours after the intervention. I was sitting in my reading chair by the lake-facing window binder tucked on the side table like a recently sheathed sword. The house felt different now, not just quieter, but reclaimed. I'd spent the morning tossing out old throw pillows Brielle had brought over during move-in prep and scrubbing fingerprints from the hallway walls. It wasn't about cleaning. It was about proof of presence and erasing it. Then the phone rang. It was my uncle. He didn't waste time. Your mother's in the hospital. I froze. She collapsed this morning. Blood pressure spike. Stress-related, they said. My stomach tightened. Is she okay? She's stable now, but they're keeping her overnight. She fainted in the kitchen. Brielle found her. I didn't say anything. He sighed. Look, I'm not saying this is your fault, but all that tension yesterday, the binder, the threats. It was a lot. So that's what this was. Was this really necessary? He asked. There it was, the line I'd been waiting for. She forged access to my home, I said quietly. She tried to sell it. That's not tension. That's theft. He was silent for a second. Still, she's your mother. As if that word wiped out every line crossed, every phone call ignored, every time she had smiled while my sister chipped away at me. I didn't argue, just said, let me know if she needs anything medical, and hung up. But the guilt lingered like a cough you can't quite shake. I made tea, paced the kitchen, stared at the folder. My mind knew this was manipulation, a well-worn family reflex to flip accountability into pity. But my heart still stung. I was raised by a woman who never missed a bill, who got me through a concussion in 6th grade, who always packed my favorite soup when I got sick. But I was also raised by a woman who believed that my needs should bend for my sisters, who thought being generous meant being silent. Now she was in a hospital bed. And even if I hadn't put her there, I'd been the one to pull the trigger on the fantasy. I scrolled through my phone. The group chat with my cousins was quiet. No updates, no concern, just silence. Then a ping. A private message from B. Brielle's oldest, 14 sharp and usually glued to her earbuds during any family event. I hadn't expected to hear from her. B. I know I'm not supposed to say anything, but I saw the papers. And I heard what Mom said after. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. This wasn't fair to you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Another message followed. Mom said we'd have our own rooms. She said it was all worked out. I didn't know it was yours. Not really. I thought you were giving it to us. I typed, then deleted, then finally sent. You're not responsible for what the adults promised. Be still. I wanted to tell the truth. I didn't know what to do with that truth from the one person no one had expected to speak. I thought of her quiet glances at dinner, the way she'd lingered in doorways like she was always halfway out of every room. Maybe she'd known more than anyone gave her credit for. The next morning, the TikToks were gone. I checked Brielle's account out of habit, expecting spin, expecting a pity post about betrayal or toxic family members or heartbreak. Instead, everything wiped. All the moving in videos, the packing montages, the lake view gloating gone. The account still existed, but it was empty, hollow. And for the first time in weeks, no one texted me. Not to guilt, not to spin, not to explain. It was quiet. But it wasn't peace. Not yet. Because peace doesn't come just from winning. It comes from choosing what to do next. The hospital smelled like bleach and overripe flowers. Someone had left a get-well-soon balloon half deflated by the hallway vending machine, sagging like the mood of the entire third floor. I found my mother's room at the end of the west wing where the windows looked out over the parking lot and not much else. She was sitting up tray table, pushed to the side, a paperback folded over her stomach like she'd meant to read it but hadn't. Her hair was flatter than usual, skin paler, but her eyes were still alert, sharp, watchful. The woman who used to run a household on coupons and casseroles didn't soften easily, not even in a hospital gown. I stepped in, binder in hand. Not the same one from before. This one was thinner, neater. "You came?" she said, voice scratchy, but not surprised. "You're my mother," I replied. She nodded, but didn't smile. They said it was stress, that I let things get too far. I didn't say anything. She looked at the window. I didn't mean for it to explode the way it did. I thought if I handled the messy parts, Brielle could just breathe for a while. She wasn't breathing, I said. She was drowning. And you handed her my oxygen mask. That landed. Not hard, just direct. She closed the book in her lap. So what now? We just don't speak after all this. No, I said. We speak. But on new terms. I sat down and opened the binder. I've already covered your hospital expenses, I told her. Follow-up care prescriptions, physical therapy, whatever the doctor recommends. Her mouth opened slightly. Thalen, I'm not doing it out of guilt, I cut in. I'm doing it because you're my mother. And because this, I gestured to the IVs. The monitors is real. It's not strategy. It's not a stunt. It's your health. And I'll show up for that. She nodded slowly. And Brielle, she asked. She'll get help, I said. But not a handout. We met the next morning in a small private room next to the hospital cafeteria. Brielle looked tired, less like a villain, more like a woman caught in her own loop. Her hoodie was wrinkled and she had dark circles under her eyes, the kind makeup couldn't hide. I handed her a printed proposal. She scanned the title page. Proposal for Debt Assistance and Financial Accountability, prepared by T. Mercer. I'm offering to cover a portion of your outstanding credit card debt up to a set amount. I tapped the number. It's not everything, but it'll give you breathing room. She glanced up. Second, I continued. I've set you up with a budgeting advisor. Weekly sessions for the next 3 months. Paid in full. She flinched slightly. Like a financial babysitter. Like a financial second chance, I said. They'll help you map out a plan, income, expenses, what you can cut. You'll need to submit proof of session attendance to maintain the support. And housing? She asked. There is no housing arrangement, I said. Calm, final. You're not moving in, not ever. That conversation is over. Silence stretched across the table. She stared at the contract. And if I don't sign this? She asked. Then we go our separate ways, I said. No money, no sessions, no contact. Her jaw clenched. You're really doing this? I already did, I said. This is the part where you decide whether to stop digging. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just pulled a pen from her bag, signed her name, and slid the paper back to me. Not out of grace, out of exhaustion. "I'll send a copy to your email," I said. She nodded. "Tell Mom I said thanks." I didn't answer, because it wasn't about thanks. It was about truth. We walked out into the parking lot together but didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to argue, just a contract, a plan, a new line in the sand. As I drove home, I thought about something my therapist once told me back in my 20s after a bad breakup with a man who never quite understood why I didn't want shared space. She said, "You teach people how to treat you, whether you mean to or not." Back then, I didn't understand what that meant. Now, I did. The house was quiet again, not hollow, not tense, just quiet in the way it was always meant to be, the way I imagined it when I first stood in that empty foyer, the lake shimmering through the back windows, the echo of my own footsteps across polished floors. I moved back in officially 2 weeks after the contract was signed. Not that I ever truly moved out. But reclaiming a space emotionally takes longer than just walking through the front door. The first thing I did was repaint the upstairs bedrooms, not out of spite, but ceremony. A way to reclaim the walls that had once held laughter not mine intentions not asked for. Soft sage for one room, dusty blue for the other. Calm colors. Mine. I boxed up anything Brielle had left behind, forgotten toys, throw pillows with glittery fonts, half-used bath bombs that had somehow made it into my master bathroom. I placed the box in her driveway one morning, rang the doorbell, and left before anyone answered. Clean lines, no notes. Every Sunday, I made pancakes for myself. Just one plate. No chaos, no tiny hands grabbing before syrup hit the table. Sometimes I played music, sometimes I didn't. I was learning to enjoy silence, not as absence, but as peace. Bea came by now and then. Not often, but when she did, it was with a quiet kind of respect that felt older than 14. She once brought me a lemon tart she'd baked herself, awkwardly handed off in a plastic container with the label still on. "Mom says hi," she mumbled. I smiled, took the tart, and said, "Tell her I said thank you." She didn't linger long, but she always left with a smile, and every now and then she'd text me pictures of her school projects, an economics presentation, a science fair plan, little snapshots of her building something of her own. Mom was softer now, not apologetic, not changed in the grand way movies pretend people do, but gentler. We had dinner once a month, her favorite booth at the diner on 3rd, where the waitress called her Han, and the menu hadn't changed since 1994. We talked about books, about the weather, sometimes about health, but never about Brielle's videos, or the realtor, or the hospital. It was a quiet agreement, peace not performance. She'd bring up Brielle, occasionally mention that she was getting better with the budget coach, that she might try community college again. I nodded, listened, never asked for more. Because healing isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's distance with grace. At work, I started hosting quiet gatherings, colleagues from the lab, a few friends from grad school. We sipped wine by the fireplace, laughed over dumb trivia, played board games that didn't end in someone storming out. No one filmed anything, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain who I was, or defend what I had. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was mine. One Saturday evening, I stood on my back porch, glass of iced tea in hand, the lake bathed in gold from the sinking sun. The breeze was soft, the world for a moment was still, and I thought about everything that had happened, the manipulation, the pushback, the silence that followed. I thought about how long it had taken me to realize that love without respect isn't love, that family without boundaries becomes a leash, and that sometimes you have to fight not to win, but to exist fully in your own skin. The final lines came to me then, not spoken out loud, but written in the quiet place in the mind where truth settles. Family can drown you or lift you, but they don't get to own you, not anymore. And with that, I went back inside. I turned on the lights and closed the door behind me.